How's it going, YouTube? My name's Larry. I kind of having an itch to just maybe make some videos, get some stuff out there. And, I just created this channel, kind of, I don't know, see what happens. And, just kind of something, sit here and kind of vent into the void. Just want to talk about certain topics, current events, or, other things going on. More life stuff. But I figure this is a topic that's fresh on my mind. I've experienced this, I've seen this, and I'd like to talk about. Online radicalization. We live in the internet age, and we live in a very specific era of this age where it feels like everyone needs to have the hottest, most divisive, most insane take possible, so they can feel like they're the smartest person in the room. There's other reasons, of course, probably other deeper personal reasons to why people want to do this, but it's becoming concerning. I don't want to be that guy, but this is a both sides issue, but I do feel like there's definitely one side that it is more concerning on, be the right. See a rise of a lot of concerning ideas that are kind of becoming mainstream again. They're reemerging. We're seeing a lot of far right ideas, specifically, not like things that happened in Germany in the 40s, things of that nature. I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube or not, but we're gonna be safe and just not. But you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just, I've seen it. I know people in my personal life who are susceptible to these ideas. I'm no different. I wasn't on the right. I was on the left, far left, when I was younger. We'll get into that. But just wanted to talk about this and give my opinion, maybe start a dialogue here in the comments, if anybody even watches this. But I'm noticing history repeat itself a little bit. I do believe that history repeats itself because as generations pass, we read the history books, we get the general idea of what went on, but we weren't there. My generation, the millennials, Gen X, the boomers, we weren't there to experience the World War II or Holocaust or, Germany back then, Europe back then. We weren't there, and there's, less and less people nowadays to really tell us how it was back then. So we're getting farther and farther from the reality of that situation. And so now you see a lot of people who are of these opinions, of these thoughts, that we need to bring this stuff back. And they're getting more and more of a platform. They're being looked at less and less, with less and less scrutiny, because we are getting further from that reality. And it sucks, because these are abhorrent ideas. These are abhorrent things that happened. And I do still believe, most of the population agrees that, we shouldn't be agreeing with Mustache Man or what he did, what he said. We shouldn't be apologizing for that. We shouldn't be whitewashing it. There's a lot of historical revisionism going on. I hear a lot of people online, a lot of big voices that are saying things that are kind of priming people to be more susceptible to these ideas. Check some of our own presidential administration right now, some of their social media pages. You'll see these weird sayings that are essentially far-right propaganda, Mustache Man propaganda. You'll see prominent right-wing voices, people that are more, mainstream, you know, saying weird things, maybe like Tucker Carlson, for example, kind of having people on his show saying maybe we should have sided with Hitler in World War II. Said it. Said his name. Oh well, we'll see what happens. But no, we're entering, I think, a very scary moment in our country, and we're becoming much more susceptible to these horrible ideas, right? And then you'll see what things are like, things people are already okay with, like mass deportations. As a good example, a lot of people are already okay with this. People are already eating up the idea of the scapegoat, right? Mustache Man, Voldemort. What were they saying back then? What were they saying was the cause of Germany's downfall back then? Immigrants, minorities were causing the downfall of Germany. And what are we saying is causing all these problems in America? Immigrants and minorities. Back then it was Jews, now it's, illegal aliens. Back then it was like, there's a big communist plot to take over the world. There's a big Jewish conspiracy, and then you see those talking points are still being espoused today. You'll see that back then they were very, how do I say this? They loved to reminisce. They loved to look back on the past of all these strong men from times of old, from ancient Rome, or the Crusades. They love to glorify stuff like that. And look, we're doing the same thing today. We're still glorifying the Crusades. We're still glorifying how masculine the ancient Romans were, and how we need to go back to that. And now we're, just about to do the same with Mustache Man and the Italian guy and a few of the others. So it's concerning. When in reality, a lot of these people that espouse these ideas, they would not fare well under these regimes. If they got what they wanted, they would not be living happy lives. If the only person that wins in a dictatorship is the dictator. Of course, that goes without saying. But a lot of these people, sadly, are, mixed race. Some of these are minorities, and they strongly believe in these ideas when really, they would not have it good under these regimes. But no, I know the mindset. I can't say how it is exactly on the far right, but I know a lot of these mindsets, why people get radicalized, why people want to be, politically insane. When I was 15, 16, I've always been a very online person, to this day still. But when I was 15, 16, I kind of got into this far left rabbit hole. It was innocent enough at first. Back then, I come from a well-off family, not super well-off. We're just, kind of middle class. We've had, some problems, but it's been fortunate enough to have good parents. It's been relatively easy life for me. So when you're in a situation like me, or when you're even better off, you don't really have a lot of problems that you face in life, or maybe you don't understand, you don't see how politics affects you and the people around you. So you make up problems, essentially. You make up problems for yourself, right? And I see that a lot on the far left and the far right. They're essentially making up problems or over amplifying things, right? So like a lot of people on the far right, it's all about how masculinity is under attack, how woke is destroying everything. um, stuff like that. But when I was getting into these rabbit holes, into these far left rabbit holes, uh, my experience is that you go into it. Nobody will tell you. Nobody in their right mind will tell you that the world is perfect. Um, there are problems. Absolutely, there are problems. And everybody has their own way of diagnosing those problems. And from my experience, and from many others I've met who've been radicalized online, it's you go into it with a thought of like, you want to see positive change in the world. You want to see a better life for yourself, a better life for your family, your friends, with people around you. That's how you go into it, with good intentions, right? We all know the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what happens, because you get into these rabbit holes starting like, oh, we could do all these things and make the world better. Why aren't we doing these things? We might need to, make some drastic changes so that we can get to these changes. But then you get deeper and deeper and you start becoming more hateful. You start becoming more entrenched, and then you start realizing, oh my God, well, the reason the world is not adhering to my fringe view is because, well, all these people these certain groups of people are taking these things from me. These certain groups of people they stole it. And they're keeping us down for a reason, for all these wild reasons. Then, conspiracy theories that you start to believe in, and you start to get angrier and angrier. And then you get to a point where it's like, well, you want these groups of people that have stolen all these things from you, that are actively ruining your life. You want to see these people suffer. You want to see these people in pain. You want to see these people removed. And so you become a more hateful person by design. When you get into these bubbles and you get like that, you start to also become estranged. It's a cult mindset. Essentially, it's very much like a cult mindset. You get more estranged. I remember when I was in these circles and I got to my deepest point, I started growing resentful towards my best friends, my only friends. I started growing distant, resentful to my closest family. My friends at the time were, also interested in politics. We talked a lot about politics, but they weren't having my ideas, and that's good, because the things I believed back then were insane. So I started feeling resentful towards them, that they weren't agreeing with me on every single point. And same thing with my parents. I mean, my parents have always been more right-wing. So yeah, naturally they're not gonna agree with far-left politics. But I started growing resentful towards them, because I would go out of my way to start arguments. I would go out of my way to bring up politics and start arguments with them. And looking back, I'm very ashamed of that behavior. That's not normal behavior. I found it fun. It was fun. Politics was fun back then. But I was also very angry. I was also very, very unhappy. It became a weird relationship where I'm going to these things, going to interact with politics in this way to both, get some dopamine, and also, like feeding off the anger that was welling up inside of me. It was very unhealthy. And then, I got to a point where the only people I was really talking to regularly on a daily basis were these random people I met online. And I was in these, these far left communities with these random people, and these bubbles can be extremely toxic. you're constantly being purity tested. And in the far left, in the communist space, there's a word which they throw around kind of like a slur. You know, they call you a revisionist. Uh, if you step out of line a little bit, maybe if you don't agree with the chat on something, on one little thing, you get called a revisionist. Essentially, what a revisionist is, because more or less every person on the far left, at the base level of their ideology, agrees with Marx and Marxist teachings. And then they kind of branch out from that. There's all different kinds of far left ideologies. It's wild. But they all believe in Marx. They all believe everything that Marx ever wrote. You know, there's some variations, some different interpretations. So it's like religion. You know, it's like reading the Bible. There's different ways of interpreting the Bible. So therefore, there's different branches of religion. It's the same idea. But so at the base level, it's all Marx. Or if you're in a certain subsect, like for example, I was a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. If you can even wrap your head around all that. If you don't agree, if you fall out of line with a teaching or a whatever anecdote, you're a revisionist, and that could be, you know, they shun you, or maybe you have to vehemently apologize and promise to change your mindset on that idea. If you don't agree to change, you're kicked out of, you're shunned, you're exiled, whatever, right? It's a cult. But yeah, you would be in these chat rooms, these group chats, and it would just be, you know, like, you got to be the most radical person. You got to give the hottest takes. You got to give the craziest opinions. And then you're kind of LARPing, right? You're kind of LARPing as a revolutionary, this great revolutionary that's going to change the world. And that's a big part of these extreme bubbles, spaces everywhere, you know, left and right, and even outside of politics, there's a lot of examples of this where, you know, it gives you this weird sense of community, even though your community is horribly toxic. It gives you this weird sense of like personal growth. You feel like you are a part of something that is much bigger than yourself. It's like on the left, it's like, on the far left, it's like, I could be a part of this great worldwide revolution that, you know, when we save the world, we make the world socialist and communist and make everybody's lives better. Which, you know, wouldn't, of course, be the case. And then, you know, on the right, it's the same thing. On the far right, it's the same thing, where it's like, I'm a part of this wonderful, glorious movement to save my people, my race, from these Jews and minorities. You know, so it gives you this weird sense of importance. Yeah, it's not healthy. And that's why I'm much more worried about the right, the far right, than I am the far left. You know, not just because the far right is much closer to power, but because the far left will never be able to unite. Like I said, there's so many branches, they're not unified. They all hate each other. All these different little fringe ideologies, they hate each other, and they consider each other revisionists. And they don't even want to see a world where they unite to bring about even the first steps of a revolution or a socialist or communist society. But yeah, it got really bad for me. Again, I was getting estranged from the people I cared about at the time. And I just, you know, it's ironic because, you know, I'd have all these arguments with my parents, and they would always say that famous right-wing conservative line where it's like, you know, once you get out there into the real world, once you get a job, you'll understand. And that's what it took. That's exactly what it took. I got my first job, 16 years old, 2020, right before the pandemic. And I was around, strangers. I was around people I didn't know, regular, normal people that have regular, normal thoughts about politics for the most part. And I realized, wow, if I if I even tried to explain the concept of Maoist third worldism to one of these people here, they look at me like I had three heads, right? I'd be the weird guy, and that was true. That was true at the time. And I just started realizing, like, wow, none of this stuff is practical. None of this stuff does anything for me. Does anything for me in the real world. This stuff, you talk to a regular person about this stuff, and they're not going to understand it, rightfully so, because, I mean, it's not practical, it's not pragmatic, to just put it simply. Um, you're taught in these bubbles, idolize these people, idolize Marx, idolize Engels, other horrible people from history, right? I mean, Marx and Engels, like Marx was just a basement dweller, as I sit in the basement, right? But Marx was really just a leech who had some ideas. And he used Engels' family money to get his book published. But then, like, other people from history, like, who are on that level of mustache man, like Stalin and Lenin and Mao and some other lesser known ones throughout the world, throughout history, you idolize. Just like how the far right idolizes ancient Rome, glorifies ancient Rome and the Crusades and, stuff like that. You idolize, you glorify the Soviet Union, or, communist China or Cuba, or, crazy things like that. And you just, you get out into the real world and you realize, wow, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. When you step out of that bubble, you realize how ridiculous it all is. So I made a gradual de-escalation of my extreme politics. I was still for a little while in the far left sphere, but it was much, much less radical. And I started learning how to parse propaganda. Started learning ways to find, okay, who's lying to me? Why are they lying to me? How are they trying to lead the horse to the water to get me to believe certain things, And that is sadly, that is all throughout our media from top to bottom. Mainstream media does this. Alternative media does this, right? Sadly, I do feel like we are very, very weak. We are very media illiterate right now, and the internet is absolutely to blame. We're in this information age where, I mean, you can Google anything, right? We all have these supercomputers in our pockets, and we can look up anything. And there's all kinds of different people saying all kinds of different things all the time. And we're not really taking the time to maybe look into it ourselves, look into things ourselves. We'll read a post a random person made on Twitter, and we'll take that as just fact. Whatever this person says is just fact. Someone on TikTok screaming into their phone right here, the phone this close to their face, screaming into their phone, or they got the phone up to their face in like a wall of text. And we'll just take whatever's on there as fact. We're not really looking into things ourselves anymore. And then, like I said, a lot of media sources can be hard to listen to follow, because they have biases, they have agendas. A lot of these media sources are just essentially propaganda for one wing. And it's a lot of it is the way that we as a country are choosing to interact with politics. Sadly, I don't think it should be this way, but sadly, politics is very entertaining now. It's very entertaining. It's very engaging, and you have these camps, these teams. It's like watching football now. Politics is like watching football. It's like you wake up every morning, you look at your social media, you take in your whatever your source is, and then you say, okay, what's my side yelling about today? What are we supposed to be angry about today? Okay, cool. Um, what's the other side doing? What's the other side doing? What are they doing that's so crazy off the wall that I'm not going to look into? Maybe they're justified, maybe they're not. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to listen to my sources. What are we supposed to be angry about today? What's my side saying? A big event happens. A big event happens, and maybe it's only happened for a few minutes. It's breaking news, and you have to figure out, okay, what side of this are we going to be on? What are we going to say about this issue 5 minutes after it happened? What's our talking points so that I can, spout those off at whoever challenges me? So yeah, it's not great. I'm not happy with our current state. I think we're in a very delicate, concerning moment, and I just hope that we can get out of this. But I don't know. It's not looking great. We'll see. We'll see. I love this country. I love the people of this country. But you want to hope for the best, but it's hard. It's really hard. Yeah, I think I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna end it there. Yeah, I have some other concepts, some other points in mind that I'd like to hit on. Some future videos. If you watched all the way through, if you're still watching right now, thank you so very much. It means a lot. I'd like to hear what you think. I'd love for your support, a like, a subscribe. Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys.